I got it. Certainly.
Ready to go now?
I'm ready. Why not?
Yeah. Let me bring this up.
Yeah.
Get it going?
Yeah. That's good.
All right.
What's up, brother?
Yeah. You're like the rock star here.
Wait, do you think you came to the wrong place?
Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. I'm Vic Gideon. I have the privilege of anchoring the morning news on the Wills and Snyder Show on WTAM 1100. And I think that's probably a good time to give a big round of applause to WTAM and iHeartRadio and to everybody here for turning out today for what I think will be an extremely meaningful event. And I can't tell you, I'm excited for myself because I think, this is obviously, as everybody knows, that follows news at all or follows politics. It's an age of volume, and it's an age of anger, and it's an age of contention. And I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to get together and to hear kind of a civil discourse, hopefully with a lot of passion and a lot of spirit. I know we'll bring that to the table, but also a very meaningful dialogue. And there's no way to overstate, as everybody knows here, and I'm sure will be brought up, no way to overstate really how important Ohio is, hence Ohio, the heart of 2020. There's been no presidential candidate, no Republican presidential candidate who has won the presidency without carrying Ohio. And Ohio has carried, or actually gone with the winner of the president. They've actually kind of predicted the winner or voted with the eventual winner every election since 1960. So this is truly a purple state, a bellwether state, and a swing state. So again, this will be a great dialogue for all of us, and we have a phenomenal group of people that are going to lead us through it. First, we have Lieutenant Governor John Husted. He is a, okay, a big round. I was going to say we're bringing him up, but that's great. He's Lieutenant Governor John Husted, the 66th Lieutenant Governor in the state's history. He's a former Secretary of State. He was with the Ohio House of Representatives, where he served as the Speaker, and he currently oversees the Ohio Common Sense Initiative and the Ohio Office of Workplace Transformation. We also have Sherrod Brown. You could give her a round of applause as well. She's the chairperson of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. She is a county councilperson for District 9 and a former Warrensville Heights City Councilwoman. I got that right. I called her a councilman before. Councilperson, councilwoman. We have Rob Frost. He is the chairperson of the Cuyahoga County Republican Party. He is in his third term in the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections and a former Rocky River councilman. We have Tom Barris. You know him. 18 years. He was a senior political correspondent at WKYC TV3. He is in the Press Club Hall of Fame. He has moderated debates between U.S. senators and Cleveland mayoral candidates, and we worked together for 10 years, so I'm kind of proud to call him both a colleague and a friend. So Tom Barris will join us today. And also a guy I have the privilege of seeing every morning at about 4 o'clock in the morning. We go on the air at 5 o'clock. And we're looking good at 4 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. I think, pretty much like we look now. I get my suit on and tie by tie. For 20-plus years, he has done his show from 5 to 9 o'clock on WTAM. He's interviewed U.S. presidents, senators, representatives. He will obviously be moderating this show as well. And I'm also very proud to call him a friend. I'd like to give a big round of applause. He bought me a milkshake yesterday.
Hey, Tommy's? Where were you, Tommy's?
And it's funny, this guy needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. And, you see little cards for everybody? For Geraldo, it's a big card. He began his 49-year career as a television reporter at WABC TV in New York and was a member of the original cast of ABC's Good Morning America. He had an 8-year association with ABC's 2020 as an investigative reporter and producer, and he produced and hosted the Geraldo Rivera Show for 11 years. Prior to joining Fox News, he served as host for CNBC's #1 rated primetime show, Rivera Live, where the critically acclaimed coverage of the O.J. civil trial and verdicts at an all-time CNBC ratings record. He's a veteran foreign correspondent who's been on the front lines of many international conflicts since 1973. Now, Geraldo is also a 3-time winner of the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award, the Scripps Howard Foundation National Journalism Award and has received more than 170 awards for journalism, including the prestigious George Foster Peabody Award, 3 national and 7 local Emmys, and 2 Alfred E. DuPont Columbia University Awards. He is a graduate of the University of Arizona. I'm sure it wasn't a party school when you went.
No. I don't remember it. But,
At Brooklyn Law School, and is the author of 8 books, including The Geraldo Show, a memoir. And he also is the host, probably most importantly, at least for now, Geraldo in Cleveland, which airs here every day from 9 to 10 o'clock at 1100 WTAM, and of course on 106.9 FM. So I want you to give a big round of applause to Geraldo, your host for tonight, Geraldo Rivera, a man who doesn't need a last name. Give it up for Geraldo.
thank you, Vic. Thank you very much. Well, I am delighted to be here. I am so happy that you all came. This is the beginning of what I think will be one of the most impassioned and hotly contested races for the White House ever. The question will be, of course, whether the most unconventional president we've ever had, Donald J. Trump, whether the 45th president will be able to be reelected. I had no doubt when he won that he would be running for reelection. He's a person who is highly polarizing, as you all know. I have known him for 45 years. He was a guest at my engagement party in 1976 in the Regen's Hotel, or the Regency Hotel, Regen's in the Regency Hotel. His dad, Fred, and my then fiance's dad, Sam Lefrak, were real estate moguls. At that time, they were just little guys from Queens, the borough of Queens, and they ultimately, as you know, became multi-billionaires. The president has been asked whether he was running for president, at least, as I recall, since 1980. I remember when he told me he was running as a Reform Party candidate. He's always been socially liberal, fiscally conservative, very flamboyant, as you know, very unconventional. The issues of race and immigration, the relations we have with countries like North Korea and Iran are pivotal. We all know that the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, was fired last night. I would applaud that also. The only thing I like about John, he's a nice enough guy, great mustache, but his politics are way too hawkish for me, and I'm glad that maybe not that Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, is that liberal, but he's certainly, I think, more restrained, a bit more restrained when it comes to intervention and war than his colleague John Bolton, who was my colleague at Fox News and probably will be back there, so I don't want to say really awful things about him. We may be office mates pretty soon. Ever since I moved to Cleveland, first of all, I covered the Republican National Convention here in 2016. And the city never looked better. You know, Erica, my wife, and I have been together for 19 years. We've been married for 16 years. She's from Shaker Heights, born there, raised there. I went to Shaker High. This community has always attracted me. I love the diversity of Cleveland and the surrounding suburbs. I love the fact that they are so, people are so, when they are involved in politics, they are so engaged in a way that it is very inspiring, that people really, there's a patriotism, whether left or right or center, that I truly appreciate. My family, like many families in the United States these days, is a divided family. You know, it's a family where I am broadly supportive of my old friend, the president, even though I disagree with him on many, many issues. But still, I give him the benefit of the doubt. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I have to hasten to add, I voted for Barack Obama, but I voted for George W. Bush in 2004. And my wife forced me to vote for Hillary this time. She sent our daughter, who was then 9 years old, into the polling place with me to confirm that I would keep my word, that I would vote for Hillary. And whether I'll vote for the Democrat next time or stick with the president, I do not know, but I am a registered Republican. My wife, a registered Democrat. If you've ever heard her as she makes her frequent visits to the radio show, her views on the president much, much different than mine. I believe that, yes, there are many things that I disagree. Some of his rhetoric is divisive. I don't like it. But I also believe that he has done more for poor people in this country than many liberals with very progressive programs who've not been able to deliver what he has, the lowest unemployment rate, for example, among African-American women in the history of the Republic, the lowest unemployment rate in many, many decades. People are working, Latinos are working like never before. There are so many positive signs in the economy that he's not given credit for. If something good happens, this is my opinion now. If something good happens during his tenure, he's not given credit for it. On the other hand, everything he does or says is construed, in my opinion, in the most evil way possible. I think that he gets the worst press of any president ever. I don't know, I didn't read many during the time of Andrew Johnson after Lincoln was assassinated, but I think that this is worse because now you have social media and he's really being hounded and harassed. And I believe that a lot of his low approval rating right now has to do with the fact that this constant negative drumbeat, even John Bolton was despised by the liberal media establishment, and now people are saying, oh, how could he fire John Bolton, and now it shows its disarray in the White House and the West Wing and all the rest of that. So I try my best to be fair. When I disagree with him, I let him know, and I let you all know. But if you think that what happens on the news channels is impassioned and opinionated, you should come to my kitchen someday because it's much more legit, much more sincere. So now I guess we'd like to bring our guests onto the stage. Isn't that, Ray, the appropriate time? Let's bring them up, beginning with the... Oh, okay. We'll start. Let's go. Let's start with the senior man on the podium. He is our current Lieutenant Governor. He is John Husted. Let's give him a round of applause. Have a seat, Governor. At the federal level, the Vice President is often almost an afterthought. It's almost like he lives to replace the President if and when that horrible thing happens. Is Lieutenant Governor are you like the spare? The spare governor?
I love it. I just go to work and everybody leaves me alone. It's a good thing. No, actually, Governor DeWine is doing a trade mission in Tokyo right now. So if something, I've got to be here to make sure I'm...
So are you effectively the acting governor as we speak? Oh, you don't like that label?
No. Look, it's wonderful. I get to work on the things that I really enjoy. Innovate Ohio, work on technology, innovation, and government. We work on workforce development, economic development, trying to streamline business regulations. That's my role as Lieutenant Governor, and I greatly enjoy it. We had a wonderful announcement last week where we have all of the universities in Ohio on the same page for the commercialization of intellectual property so we can spin out more entrepreneurial ventures from our universities. I get to work on things like that, and I really enjoy it because that's what drives the economy. You put people to work. Good public policy is good politics, and Governor DeWine and I work really well together on that.
I know that the President is this hot? I know that the President was very concerned about the closing of the GM plant in Lordstown. Let's go right there. Do you think that many of the blue-collar people who voted for the President last time are disillusioned by negative acts like GM pulling out of that crucial plant near Youngstown?
Yeah, well, certainly Lordstown, we spend every day on Lordstown or every week on Lordstown, and there are some developing issues there. But look, as you alluded to in your opening remarks, the unemployment rate for people in Ohio is very low. When I am with employers, the number one issue that employers talk to me about is that they can't find enough people to go to work to fill the jobs that they have. And so that's why we're really focused on trying to help people upskill and get the skills of the jobs that are available in the changing economy. But you see wonderful growth, low unemployment rates, but it's uneven. There are some places where you see tremendous job growth, in the tech sector, in the financial sector, in the service sector, but where you have others that are a little more legacy in manufacturing and agriculture. Not that they aren't growing and producing, it's just you don't need as many jobs to do the same amount of work, and it requires more technological skills than it used to. So there's a transition going on in that part of the economy. The rural economy not doing as well as big cities. So it's an uneven growth that you see throughout the country and certainly throughout the Midwest, and that's a concern.
My colleague Vic Gideon alluded to the crucial nature of the Ohio vote as the ultimate purple state. Tell me about the demographics of Ohio. How do you see, is it whiter than it was? Is it blacker than it was? Is it more brown or Latino? What is going on demographically, and what are the implications of the demographic shifts?
Look, I think Ohio is a lean red state at this point. Doesn't mean a Democrat cannot win Ohio, not at all. But it does lean red, and the reason is demographically we're an older state. We tend to be a less diverse state, and that demographic presently in a Trump world is a lean Trump, lean Republican audience. It can always change. That's the fun thing about politics, is that nothing's ever permanent. It can move on. The lessons you learn from 2 years and 4 years earlier are always, they're helpful, but they're not determinative of what's going to happen in the future. But the demographics in Ohio, and you look at the statistics, you see it is a lean red state, but that with the right candidate or the right environment, that certainly is up for grabs for anyone.
My guest, the first guest, Lieutenant Governor John Husted of we're delighted to have him here. Tell me, I was told and have thought since the Republican Convention of 2016 that the election of the President of the United States is often determined by the people on the I-4 corridor in Florida, that's the barometer, or the suburbs in Cuyahoga County. Are these crucial, the folks in and around Cleveland, to the President's quest to take Ohio and retain the presidency?
The suburbs and then the ring counties around. I will tell you, I tell you a quick story. When I was here for the convention, as you remember, our sitting governor at the time, John Kasich, didn't go to the convention. And I had some Republicans that were in Columbus who don't leave the 270 Beltway in Columbus tell me, the governor's right, you should join with him and not be for Trump for president. And I said, guys, have you ever left the Beltway of Columbus? Have you ever gone out into rural Ohio, like where I grew up in rural Northwest Ohio? I said, you couldn't find a Hillary Clinton sign in a whole county in some of the rural areas of Ohio. There was one county, Mercer County along the Indiana border, that went 80-20 for Donald Trump. I mean, you have, and so those were places that used to be competitive, and so it's the overwhelming vote in the rural areas. Which means that in the suburban areas, there are some battlegrounds there, but I would say that the overwhelming vote in the rural area has really been determinative of why Ohio is a lean red state now, and it's no longer competitive for Democrats. But that means that those suburban audiences that the Democrats have to do even better in for them to have a chance to win Ohio.
So what do the Democrats have to do? What does the president and the Republicans have to do? Are the Democrats facing a more daunting task? It seems that you believe that you've got this in the bag.
Well, no. I don't. Would never say that, because Ohio is it's a big diverse country. A lot of different pathways to the presidency. I think when you have an incumbent, it's always a referendum on the incumbent to a certain extent. So if the economy is strong and the president puts forward an agenda, says, you got to stick with me. We got America moving in the right direction, and I think that people will be likely to support him. It's so early, though. It's like people say, do you think Donald Trump's going to win? I said, well, tell me who his opponent is first, and then I'll have a better idea, because I think that there are some Democrats that certainly give the Democrats a better shot to win than others.
Okay, I'm going to ask you of whom you speak. Now,
I'm not going to give the Democrats the pathway to the victory.
We'll
we'll make sure that no Democrats can hear this.
Yes.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. What about, you have the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party, which seems very activist, very progressive, all of their policies, not just the minimum wage, the, free public education, most prominently health care, Medicare for all. How will they fare? How does the far-left candidates fare?
I think that in Ohio that they can't win. I just think that Ohio is a state that's politics is very moderate. They don't want an agenda that feels like it's not what they're about. Look, healthcare can be an issue, education can be an issue, but I don't think people believe that essentially socializing the healthcare system or a giant Green New Deal that changes the way that we turn our lights on and that's frankly unrealistic about how it could possibly be implemented I don't think that's a winning pathway for a candidate. I think that in Ohio, and I know that there are Democrats talking Joe Biden down. I think Joe Biden is the kind of person that could win. I think anybody that has a moderate audience, a moderate appeal, so they don't scare suburban voters, but also can be supported by minority groups is the right kind of candidate for the Democrats to nominate.
So you believe that the former vice president is the strongest candidate the Democrats have in the field right now?
Right now, but that doesn't mean, look, there's a long
Is
race
he too old?
Well, they're both too old, right? I mean, in some
I'm definitely too old.
In some people's eyes, right?
He's 9 months older than I am.
Look, it's.
I have much better hair.
In some people's eyes, they're all. This is how I think that people view age. It's like when you're not for the candidate, they're too old. When you're for the candidate, they're like, no, they're great. Look how vigorous they are for their age. And it's just, do you like what they believe in? Do they connect with you? I just think that the formula is for the Democrats is they have to find somebody that doesn't scare suburban voters.
How about Kamala Harris, Senator Harris?
I know Kamala actually fairly well. We were in an Aspen Institute program together, and I think if she, there are two versions of her that I've heard out there. If she pursues I think that if you're forced to get dragged too far to the left by this primary of 20-some people, then you're going to have a hard time in the general election. If you can manage to be to have some tethers to a moderate agenda, while at the same time being an inspiration, then I think that's the profile for a candidate that's got a chance.
Remind me, has Tim Ryan backed out yet, or is he?
He has not. He did not make the main stage in the debate, or he's not going to be in the third debate.
But how about his politics, though, seem to resonate in the the formula that you described, Governor?
He's not even in the debate, so I think he's like the younger version of Joe Biden. So and Joe Biden's got the. He's got the name recognition on him. Yeah.
He's got the Scranton vote.
Yeah.
To the extent that he has it. What about big issues? Before we yield to the other speakers, and we have some great panelists, including our colleagues that will take the stage soon. What about war and peace? What about how concerned, how profoundly engaged are Ohioans about Iran and North Korea, and now some of these other hot spots? The issue of war and peace, is there confidence that the president is steering the ship of state in a prudent way?
I just don't think that those are issues that people make decisions on in an election unless there's a super important issue where we might be in a conflict. I think that if you're talking about the rest of the world, they're more worried about trade in this state than they are. And not that they sit around and read trade agreements and say, well, it's just how it affects them in their lives. Did the things that did they buy, did it affect their job, did it affect a member of their family's job? I think that those things are the foreign relation issues that people in Ohio care about as it affects them in their daily lives.
So as things stand right now, give me a spread. Give me the number that you project on that November night 2020.
Okay, only because you're asking, because I have no idea, all right? If you think you know what's going to happen right now, then you don't know what you're talking about. But I'd say, if given the situation right now, where the economy is doing well, people are working, their lives are better, then I think that always goes to the incumbent. The incumbent has the edge in this case, and being Donald Trump.
And what's in the future for you, Lieutenant Governor John Huston?
To be the greatest lieutenant governor in the history of the state of Ohio,
But I don't remember any other lieutenant governor.
That's right. Mike DeWine was one. He's now the governor. It is. I really enjoy working as lieutenant governor, and I just believe that in politics, just do a good job with the job you have, and everything else takes care of itself.
What do you think? Let's hear it for Lieutenant Governor John Huston. Well done, sir. Well done. Dick, what do we have coming up?
Keep it going for John Huston.
Yeah, let's go.
Great job, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you very much. Now, our pleasure to bring up the host of the morning news, Bill Wills, on WTAM 1100. So this is where the thunderous applause comes in. A guy I work with every morning. Give it up for Bill Wills.
If my mom could see me now, I'm with Geraldo Rivera. By the way, since DeWine's out of town, I've stood in line at the BMV for 2 days. September 28th is an important day for me. That's my birthday. Can you help me get my driver's license renewed, John?
Absolutely.
Good man. Ohio has birthed 8 presidents. The 9th is in the room, I think.
All right, wow. High praise, Governor, high praise. There you go. So what do you think, Bill? How's politics locally? I want to start local. I know we're here to talk cosmically.
Sure. Everything's local.
But everything is local. I've never seen a mayor like Frank Jackson before.
The Enigma?
I've never seen
Nobody's
Mayor
seen
Jackson.
Frank, the Enigma.
Is there really a Cleveland mayor, or is it just a...
With all due respect to Mayor Jackson, as many of you know that know the mayor's wife's been ill for a long time, so there's some personal things. Number one, I had a fascinating time with the mayor a few years ago. I had a chance to introduce him with Larry Dolan down at the Indians for a benefit for Cleveland Baseball Federation. I sat with the mayor at his table, and we had a great one-on-one off the record. He took me around every neighborhood. He took me through every business cycle. He had tremendous ideas. And I sat there and thought, wow. And he goes, the problem is you can't get anything done. And I'm like, where is this vision all the time? And where is this voice and this face that this city I really think needs? So I have a lot of respect for the mayor, but it's a challenging time for him in so many ways in this city. So, and there really are
grandson and all the rest.
Yeah, and I mean, Geraldo, there are 2 Clevelands. I mean, my goodness, we are blessed downtown with these amazing facilities and buildings and what we're doing at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. But my goodness, we could all get in the car in about 15 minutes, be in a place that we really wouldn't want to talk about, sadly. A lot of big cities are that way, and Mayor Jackson has a lot of that on his plate in managing both those things. Yeah.
I want to stick on that urban violence for 1 second.
Yeah.
Cleveland had a terrible reputation in the 70s, and it's continued somewhat. I think it's been mitigated as the city has progressed, and I'm very proud to call Cleveland my home. But how do you deal with that 2 Clevelands? I mean, what in the world can the government do to alleviate this disparity, this despair, the violence that claims over 100 lives just in this town alone?
I know we have several officers here. I respect their work. I see our friend Mr. Lomas back there who's worked so hard. It's a challenge. I mean, personally, I think it's the breakdown at home of the family and responsibility. But so much of that, to tie in the economy, as Lieutenant Governor Husted started some, it's jobs, it's opportunity, where a young person growing up sees what is possible. And sadly, in many communities, they don't see that for a variety of reasons that are cultural and social, and we all have challenged those for years, and that really plays out in this city.
What about civic engagement? I am very impressed with the philanthropy in the city.
Yes.
Some of it multi-generational, the generosity, but the institutions are so fantastic. The museums and the Philharmonic, and there's so much going on here. and then you go on to Euclid and you look around. I ride my bicycle around there and I say, "Whoa, dude, this is very melancholy." You remember Dennis Kucinich? I mean, what do we need here? What do we need the next guy in Cleveland?
The next guy needs to be a face. Needs to be maybe out more of a cheerleader. I moved here in '98 from Cincinnati, and you mentioned the philanthropic effort in this town. It's amazing. I have an opportunity and been blessed to MC a lot of events. One of the first ones I ever did was with Sam Miller. And Sam, God bless him, we were at an event for the Salvation Army. And I brought him up, introduced him. It was a nice fundraiser. And Sam, okay, here's what we're going to do. Every table is 10,000. You're 10, yours. That's how he raised money. And it's that. And for those of you that know Sam, that was his attitude in raising money. And that effort is played out in this city in so many organizations. And you've come across so many in your time here as well. It is a city that is blessed so many and is a blessing to live in, but also has its challenges that we focus on, especially when it comes to election time.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Cleveland Browns there.
I saw you at the game. You had good seats.
Oh, excellent.
Hey.
Thanks to George Allen.
Well, hey, we're George. Hey, I've been here 20 years. Did you get a parking pass, too?
They let me go into the stadium.
Geraldo.
George didn't do that. The Browns did that. But I was very disappointed.
Yeah.
All right, get back to national politics.
Yeah.
Bill Wills, everybody knows him. Cleveland's Morning News with Wills and Snyder, my lead-in. Bill's been very kind to me. Everybody at the station has been excellent in terms of easing my transition into Cleveland radio, and I really deeply
you're
appreciate
kind. You're a pro.
No,
You're a pro.
you have that deep knowledge that I am proud to tap into from time to time. What do you think of? And now let's get back to presidential politics.
Sure.
We're talking about 2020 now, and this is such a big election coming up. Talk about the division that I alluded to, not only cosmically and in society, but family to family, as in my own.
I think Lieutenant Governor Houston touched on it somewhat this state. Growing up in southern Ohio, I mean, with all due respect to Cincinnati, they still vote for Eisenhower. I mean, they don't even know Reagan's come along in some cases. It's very conservative, okay? And so coming to Cleveland, it was an eye-opener for me about this part of the state. In many ways, Ohio is like the country. If you think of the Northeast being more liberal and the central southern part of the state being more conservative, western Ohio as well. Jim Rhodes, who ran this state for years, and I remember as a kid, would go around to campaign events in Gallia County or wherever and hold out a billfold and say it's about jobs, jobs, jobs. And that's what it probably is at the end of the day. You and I spend a lot of time talking about Afghanistan, Iraq, what's happening in the Middle East, all these topics, the noise of the day, John Bolton, I mean, all this noise. I just think at the end of the day, when you go in and vote, you vote for somebody you think's going to keep your family safe, and give you and your family an opportunity to grow economically. And at the end of the day, it's the economy. Now, the economy has thrown people out of office. See Bush 41. We didn't think it was that bad, but Bill Clinton told us it was. You're seeing signs.
The economy
it's
stupid?
The economy stupid. You're seeing signs. I think it's a strong economy with a small s. And we may hear that some with our panel. You could slice it a lot of different ways right now. But I think at the end of the day, it'll be the economy. Back on Ohio, Trump won last time by 8 points. And I don't even know who he's going to run against. So whoever they are, they've got to look at Ohio and say it was 8 points. We birthed 8 presidents, and our electoral votes have probably helped 2 or 3 get into the White House. Yeah.
I meant to ask the Lieutenant Governor this, but Bill, let me just get your opinion on it. I've seen it. I covered it in Dayton. I was the epicenter of what is a national crisis and epidemic of opioids. It's the most horrible thing you can imagine. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's crossing racial lines and economic lines, and it's decimating so many families, making them dysfunctional. I covered dope. They used to call me the Edward R. Murrow of dope news. I started in 1970, 1971 in the old, when heroin was a ghetto drug.
Right. You knew Ed, too, right? Did you know Murrow?
I never met him, but his producer, Fred Friendly, was my mentor and my teacher at Columbia University. So I'm kind of a bridge to those old days.
Sure.
But I admit to being really melancholy about this awful epidemic, and I don't know what the hell you do about it. Tell me how it affects the lives of Ohioans.
It affects every life. I'm amazed. I for years served on the board of the Salvation Army, and I heard, 10 years ago in meetings, that zip codes that all of a sudden were a bit shocking were having these problems, not just the inner city. And it's been amazing. And I'm sure there are families here that have been touched in sadly maybe the ultimate way. I know our family has had some that we've been extremely surprised about. I don't have the answer. I don't know what you do, but it certainly is something. I know I talked to some of John's staff earlier. He was at the White House yesterday as the president was honoring those first responders in Dayton, and fentanyl and the opioid problem was also being discussed in the room as well, because it all kind of goes together maybe in a few ways with our culture now, Geraldo.
So you think that these mass shootings and these other acts of violence, everything tied to the dysfunction, but ultimately opioid abuse is someplace in there?
Yeah, yes, and yes. I mean, it was weird. Age-wise, in my age group, heroin was like, my gosh, heroin? What are you doing? And now it's like, marijuana. It's like a gateway almost, That's how far it's come. The other real sad thing is, and there's so many stories, that people have the addiction, they get off it, and then when they have to get the hit, it's a much stronger dose, or it's not cut properly, or there's a bad mix. I have a good friend that's on the board over at university who has said, in the news we'll report about, and this, Geraldo, on a Monday morning, there were 20 ODs, 20 overdoses, because of a bad batch that got in somewhere in St. Louis or Cincinnati. We don't have the numbers of the emergency room that night, where there were other people that showed up that needed help that lived. And it continues to be an epidemic. It's a problem, no doubt.
It is. It's horrifying, and I don't know what the hell to do about it. You send the word out.
Yeah.
But I just, I've been around so long, once a junkie, it's very tough not to stay a junkie.
Yes, sir.
Or return to it. Okay, may we bring our other guests? Should we bring them all up? Lead Bill?
We are honored. First of all, the State Democratic Party, you better watch out, because I know Vic already gave some introductions, but Chantel, please come on up. She has done a fabulous job.
Chantel Brown, ladies and gentlemen.
County Democrat Party. There's always a first, ladies and gentlemen, the first female African-American to lead the Cuyahoga County Democrat Party. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Tom Barris, why don't you join us over here? Chantel, you sit next to me. I'm going to hog you.
Tom Barris is the senior of seniors.
Old-time political analyst. Come on up, Tom. Tom Barris, ladies and gentlemen. He knows everything about everything. Chantel's counterpart is the Republican chair of Cuyahoga County, Rob Frost. Come on up, Rob. And Bill, you stay. Okay. Rob Garcia.
Great to see you.
You, mate. Okay,
Chantel,
thank
real
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Chantel, have a seat. Thank you very much for being here. The Lieutenant Governor paints a pretty grim picture from the point of view of Democrats. Do you agree with his assessment that Ohio has slid, from being truly a purple bellwether battleground to leaning red, leaning Republican? What do you think, Chantel?
Well, I have to say that this is a line that I took from our state party chairman. I think that Ohio is more rigged than red. I think that, the gerrymandering has made it so...
More rigged than red.
More rigged than red, yes. I mean, because with the gerrymandering, it doesn't promote people to go out when they think that the odds are already stacked against them. So when you have disenfranchised voters, then they're, discouraged and they tend to stay at home.
So you're not suggesting, as some have, that the actual votes are tampered with or that there's voter suppression. You think that gerrymandering, the old trick of putting all the minorities in one basket in a freaky-looking district that's shaped like a salamander. So you think that that's what it is? That they have the legislators controlled by Republicans have disenfranchised minority Democrats.
I think that has a big part of it, and we also have to be mindful that the 2020 census we'll have an opportunity to change that, and so that's going to be important with this upcoming election as well. So,
what about turnout in counties like ours?
Well, voter turnout in Cuyahoga County, I'm proud to say, under my leadership, is trending in the right direction. So we're moving up. We've got more voters showing up at the polls with less numbers. So the percentages are much higher. When you think about 2008, we had over 1 million registered voters in Cuyahoga County. And in the 2018 election, we had 900,000. Yet we were able to deliver 490,000 voters in that midterm election. So we are trending in the right direction.
Tom, let me skip over you to just get Rob's reaction to what Chantel has said. What about turnout? What about confidence on the Republican side. What about overconfidence on the Republican side, Rob Frost?
Sure, we've got to guard against the overconfidence. But first, let me say that Chairwoman Brown is exactly right, and both parties are focused on turnout. The Democrats have done a great job getting their vote out. We've been doing the same, and we now have more registered Republicans in Cuyahoga County than at any time since Ronald Reagan was president. And
that's because I moved here. But then my wife
that's
1 and 1.
That brought our numbers up, and more Republicans in Cuyahoga County than any other county in Ohio. So we want to turn that vote out. We want to see huge turnout in 2020. We want everyone to vote. One thing we're focused on right now as a party, not just us in Cuyahoga County, but statewide, is voter registration. Asking every eligible person to get registered to vote. We're not asking them first who you're going to vote for. We're saying we want to get you registered to vote, and I think both parties share that objective. Let's get the turnout strong. Now, if we take it for granted and say, well, we won by nearly 9% last time in the presidential, so we can just roll that up again, I think Lieutenant Governor Houston already answered that pretty well. We would get caught flat-footed. We need to be out there spreading the message of the economic miracle of this presidency, what it has done for minority unemployment, what it has done for the economy overall. That's how people are going to be making up their minds in 2020.
Tom, you're sitting in the hot seat there between the Republican chairman and the Democratic chairman. You've been around. You've been. I'm sorry, chairwoman. Exactly. I stand corrected. That's just because I'm, so ancient. Anyway, I go back to the silent movies. But Tom, what do you see? What are you sensing? What are you feeling? As you've heard both sides now. What do you give us your objective assessment?
All right. Well, a lot of us remember back in 2004 when Ohio was absolutely crucial, pivotal, the ultimate quintessential swing state. And those of us who maybe have this color hair remember Tim Russert on NBC with the whiteboard. Ohio, Ohio, Ohio. And Ohio did wind up being the ultimate decisive state in that particular election. I don't think it has that great distinction of being the ultimate swing state anymore. I know the program calls us Ohio the heart. I'd say maybe we're like the gallbladder or something now. Important, but not absolutely necessary. I think the Democrats do have a pretty steep fight, no matter who their nominee is. All of these state offices, with the exception of Senator Brown, 2 Supreme Court justices, are held by Republicans. So there's that many more Republican voices to help President Trump out there. And at the moment, the president has a huge head start in raising money and getting troops on the ground and already working, where the Democrats are still deciding amongst themselves whether to be pragmatic or whether to be progressive or somewhere in between. So, yeah, I think it's winnable for the Democrats, absolutely. But I think right now, if you look at the way the cards are stacked and the pieces are in place, it's aligned. So it's, arguably, despite the polls, I think Republicans have a huge organizational advantage right now.
You're not suggesting that Chantel Brown's organization is less high-functioning?
I'm not saying they're sitting on their hands. I'm not saying they're sitting on their hands at the moment. But again, the Democrats are all focused inward at the moment, deciding what the message is going to be and who the messenger is going to be. Yeah, I know they're doing what they can to, lay groundwork and recruit workers. But until probably early next spring, they're not going to know who they're promoting and what the winning message they think is going to be.
I want to go back to my buddy Bill Wills there. The whole issue of turnout is so critical. Do you think that the Democrats cannot win without the minority vote?
Sure.
If Kamala Harris is unique, do you think that if it's not Senator Harris and it is one of the other candidates, like Pete Buttigieg, how's Pete Buttigieg going to do in inspiring minority voters on the Democratic side to come out and vote?
Tom mentioned 2004. I got a little gray. In 2004, for turnout, just to make a point, it was close with Bush and Kerry. A lot of polls had Ohio. Kerry was up 2-3 points. Bill Hemmer, a mutual friend of ours, and I worked in Cincinnati with him. At that time, he was on CNN. Now he's now on Fox. I got a call one day from CNN. They want me on the 4 Fridays leading up to the election. The typical 8 guests in a box, the old Larry King, there's 5 people, and they're all yelling at each other. And I was the guy in Ohio. And on the Friday before, they asked me, okay, who's going to win, Bill? I said, Bush. They looked at me like stunned. And in the ear, I heard the producer go, what? You know? And I said, well, you asked me. I said, Bush. And they said, well, you're in Cleveland. I said, I know, but that's one of 88 counties. The weekend before, I'd been through Columbus and Cincinnati, and the Bush signs were all over the place. To Chantel's point, she can have tremendous turnout. That year, Cuyahoga outperformed. That night, a lot of people went to bed, as you'll remember, thinking Bush had lost Ohio because Cuyahoga was going to roll that number down through the state. But the southern part of the state, as Tom and everybody remembers, in the western part of the state, they came out big for Bush, and no matter what the number was in Cuyahoga County, they couldn't quite overcome it. She'll do a fantastic job, I have no doubt. She doesn't even know who her candidate is yet. I mean, they'll turn out, but the problem's going to be around Cuyahoga County. So, yes, turnout, and Trump can turn them out, as we've seen.
Sherrod Brown, Democratic chair of the Cuyahoga County organization there. Do you think the President of the United States is a racist?
He certainly says things that make you wonder. I would say that. It's so that would be my response.
So I've known him forever, and that building, Trump Tower, is as integrated as any public organization in his private business. But I do agree, and I've told him that he says things in a sloppy way that can allow people to construe what he says as being racist. I think that, are people too sensitive to that issue, or do you think that people are not sensitive enough?
Well, I think that in the society that we live in today, he has certainly changed the norms or the expectations of individuals. And as a minority, I can speak for myself, I'm very sensitive to some of the things that I hear, but I also have been raised as a strong woman to be able to go into different environments and navigate, even when some of those things that come at me that may not be perceived by the individuals that are speaking them as racist or offensive, to understand that sometimes privilege and entitlement will put blinders on people, and they don't realize the effect that they're having on a minority or someone that is of less, that doesn't have their same experiences, I will say that.
Well, let me ask you, on the other hand, do you think that Democratic leadership takes the African American and Hispanic communities for granted?
It's been said, but I would also say, as a Democrat and one who has had the benefit of a rapid rise in this party, I'm very proud of the work that we've been able to do in a short amount of time. I'm particularly proud of Cuyahoga County for electing its first female and first African American chairwoman in its 200-year history. It speaks to the belief and the potential that they see in me to be able to deliver great results for our party. So, whether or not what that may have been in the past, I'm not focused on the past. I'm very much focused on the future and continue to build and strengthen our party in that way.
Well, I think you're a very, very impressive woman. I was going to say young lady. My wife would be so mad.
I'll take the young lady. Thank you.
Well, she would be so mad at me if I let it slip. But I didn't. I was making fun of her, for the record. I have to give equal time to Rob Frost, your colleague and your equal on the other side of the aisle. Why do Republicans just let that vote go? You have people like Dr. Darrell Scott here. I think that you could be competitive. The Republicans could be competitive for some of the urban votes, so-called, if you worked at it. I mean, going to Hunting Valley for fundraisers is great, but you got plenty of money already. I think you got to spread the wealth a little.
Listen, I agree with you, and that's why what we're focused on here is competing for every vote, going in and talking to voters in every single precinct. We in the Cuyahoga County Party have a director of minority engagement who is working daily on issues from voter registration, which I already mentioned, to economic inclusion and opportunity, to choice in education and criminal justice reform. And we've seen the president take this. This isn't just the local level. This is living out, bearing out what we're seeing in the national level of the leadership in the Congress, bipartisan leadership, giving the president a bill, the First Step Act, giving people a second chance at life, who had been convicted under the really onerous sentencing policies that we have
I think
previously.
that he doesn't do enough to promote himself, and that was a wonderful, wonderful. And Chantel, you have to admit that the First Step Act was quite impressive. I had a conversation with Van Jones, a CNN commentator and a Trump critic, about it. That was a big deal. I mean, particularly in our county, where we've had so much trouble with the jails and so forth. It just seems to me that this is a president that has taken a step that I don't remember any Democrats taking a similar step. I mean, shouldn't that be encouraged?
Well, that's an initiative, if we're going to talk about the facts, that was started long before Trump got in office. So I appreciate his ability to get it done, but that's long-standing work. So and there's so much more work to be done as it relates to that.
You know, Tom Barris, why does Sherrod Brown defy the trends? How does he do it? In a state that is obviously trending right, trending Republican, how does he, this disheveled kind of academic-seeming senator, how does he defy the, this tide?
Well, I think the phrase that he used in his re-election campaign for Senate, the dignity of work. I think he appeals to working-class Ohioans. He says what he means. He means what he says. He's been very consistent. I just introduced, I think, a new package of legislation yesterday that I believe would help workers at companies that are in the transition to new technology. That would require them to either train workers or give them advance notice of the looming change coming to their livelihood. So he is consistent, and I think he's trustworthy. I think a lot of people regret that maybe he didn't stay in the race for president. I think ultimately his explanation was, I didn't have that fire in the belly, and I thought I could do more good as a senator. And again, not having any grand insight, but I'm thinking maybe one other unspoken factor. Ohio voters have looked at an unpleasant chapter in his past about his first marriage and decided that some of the issues surrounding that didn't override what else he brought to the table. But I'm thinking in this environment, when the national media discovered that he had issues in his marriage and suggestions of maybe some sort of borderline domestic violence, that maybe he and his current wife decided they didn't want to, even for a couple of days, be the hot button story, and with so many strong women candidates, that would have been quite an ordeal for him to go through. And again, I've not had this discussion with him, but it's just my perspective, another possible reason beside the one that he gave why he decided not to stay in the game. But you're right, he is the last man standing, last person standing among Ohio Democrats. And again, the Ohioans have not really warmed to Tim Ryan's campaign. I think had he stayed in the game, he might still be a factor and would have likely been one of the 10 or 11 on stage going forward.
What does Bill Wills think about that?
I think Sherrod Brown, I was surprised he got out. I agree with Tom on all those points. He, on television, he still looks 35. It is amazing that he still looks like he's in his 30s. And to that point, I think one of the challenges...
That's because of Lady Clara.
Well, I was going to... you look like you're early 30s, Geraldo. But I was going to mention to Chantel, I think that's one of the challenges. My daughter, who is, I'll bring her up, is about 25, would look at the Democratic field and want somebody that doesn't look like her grandfather, with all due respect, Geraldo, over the age of 70. And that's really a challenge. And I thought Sherrod could pull that off. He's in his 60s, yes, but he's as youthful and as vigorous on the campaign trail, and just decided to pull the plug for whatever reason.
I'm like the grandfather from Burning Man. The women have become such a force of nature in American politics today. I mean, I think that in a microcosm, Chantel Brown, your rise is, instructive and exemplifies what I'm talking about. You came from, a total unknown, and here you took over this powerful county, including this important city. And yet, do you believe in your heart of hearts that a woman can be elected?
Absolutely. I think what happened in 2016 when we did have our female presidential nominee is that such a strong, qualified candidate, I think too many people took the race for granted, and people did not show up or casted their vote for a third-party candidate. But we've learned from our mistakes. Let me be clear about that. So we will be working very hard for 2020 to make sure that no matter who the Democratic nominee is, that the party will fully get behind that candidate.
How do you stay neutral, or are you neutral as the not the county organization per se, but you must have a preference, and that I would love you to share with us. Come on, Chantal, give us an inside exclusive.
That's for another day. You can invite me back for the inside exclusive.
When I spoke to the I shall indeed, thank you. When I spoke to the lieutenant governor, he was talking about, you know, President Trump can rally the rural, the less educated. Do you agree that the Democrats have lost the Walmart shopper, the deplorable?
I'm not sure who the deplorable is of the Walmart shoppers. I'll leave that there. But what I will say is that the Democratic Party is focused on making sure that we are the party that can help working people fulfill the American dream. That is our goal. That is our message. That is we do. We are the big tent party.
Then how'd you lose them?
Well, I will say, as a minority, and you touched on it a little bit, perhaps historically the Democratic Party could be has been said to take the vote for granted. Hillary pulled her campaign out of Ohio in 2016, and I think that did do some damage. And so we have to demonstrate that we are still the bellwether state and the swing state and the powerhouse that we once were in 2004.
But isn't it, and I don't mean to be contentious, but isn't it a fact that haven't the Democrats, in a sense, you know, in 2016 and that whole basket of deplorables thing, haven't they disconnected from the old white guys?
I would say no. I think when you talk about candidates, with all due respect to the more seasoned candidates like your Joe Bidens of the world, they are the types of candidates that can connect with our older white men. And I think that I am well positioned as a minority and a female to be able to speak from someone who
I would vote for you.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope there are more people that feel that way. But as a person who has lived through feeling disenfranchised, I feel confident that I can go into those rooms where we do have unions that have not been, who have felt the promises be broken by our current president as it relates to the closing of the GM plants and things like that, and be able to connect with them and make sure that they understand that their votes are equally important to the Democratic Party, and we want to make sure that they understand that the American dream is still alive, and we want to be the party that helps them achieve it.
When the lieutenant governor was here, Rob Frost, he described how entire swaths of this state were classic working class Democrat. And now they are 70-30 for Trump specifically and for Republicans more generally.
Right.
How'd you do that?
Well, we didn't. Over time, we've been building bridges, registering new voters, winning over slowly around the margins. The sea change was Donald Trump running in 2016. He has attracted more blue-collar working-class voters, more union households to the Republican Party. The big reason is this. It gets to the heart of your last couple of questions. I certainly believe a woman can be elected president of the United States, but it's not going to happen in 2020 because Donald Trump's going to be reelected. And that's, you know, regardless of who the Democrats nominate on the other side, they may nominate a woman candidate or a male candidate, but I believe that Donald Trump's going to be the one reelected because what I don't think this country is going to elect is a leftist socialist as our president.
So you don't think that Elizabeth Warren has a shot?
No, not at all.
What about Senator Harris, who's more centrist? And actually, if you look at her record on law enforcement, she's running away from it. I think that she should run toward it, but maybe not to get the nomination. Right. She had she was a law and order attorney general in California.
She's the one who impresses me and I fear the most in terms of providing that competitive challenge.
So for the record, the chairman of the Cuyahoga County Republican Party thinks that Kamala Harris is the most powerful
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, I think a Harris-Ryan or Harris-Brown ticket that would help them in Ohio, I think they're going to need that. But I don't think they're going to have that because what your question back about Sherrod Brown, how does he survive? He survives the way a few other Midwestern Democrats have survived, by pretending to be what they're not. They pretend to not be leftists. They pretend to not be socialists. They run away from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And they pretend to be just good old Midwestern down-home people. And they're not. They've given into this nationalist agenda that would have us have open borders, would have us tax away any wealth creation, and just give the incentive to penalize success in this country. That's not what this country's been built on. It's not what we're going to re-elect in 2020.
Chantel, I have to ask you to respond
That's
to
a
that.
false narrative. I have to just completely disagree. I think that is a Trump talking point where he talked about left democratic socialists. I am in no way a socialist, but I am a very proud Democrat. I believe in, again, supporting working people. When we talk about this economy that is doing so well, we have to also bear in mind that it is at a $26 million deficit, $26 trillion deficit that the economy is doing well. When we talk about
That's 1,000 billion.
when we talk about the low unemployment rate, it is because so many people are working multiple jobs just to keep afloat. It's not because the economy is doing so well. When we talk about employers being unable to fill jobs, there's a skills gap in Ohio. There's a skills gap in Cuyahoga County where they can't hire people because they don't necessarily have the skills to fill the jobs. So while we might want to portray a few of the Democrats that have these opinions, they do not represent the entire party. I think in general, when we speak about Cuyahoga County people and people in America, we are mostly in the middle. Most of us fall in the middle, and I'm not ashamed of that. So when we put this leftist, socialist, democratic socialist message out there, that's not true, and it's wrong. So.
Well, just look at it this way. Look, with what I said about
Go ahead, Rob.
Kamala
Rob
Harris,
Ross.
and thanks, Kamala Harris, and if she were to be nominated and choose as her running mate Tim Ryan, I'd be worried. I'd say, boy, our job just got tougher. Look at who the other side has nominated, an impressive ticket, but they're cratering. Tim Ryan's not even registering, not even going to be on the debate stage, and Kamala Harris had a nice bump when she took on Joe Biden, but has faded ever since. The Democratic Party is not there. They're not willing to nominate those sorts of candidates. Now, if they do, we're still going to win Ohio. We're still going to deliver that. What I'm saying, though, is our job gets tougher because the Democrats got back to their roots of what they used to be about. What I hear over and over in Cleveland from former Democrats is, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. Democratic Party left me. That's not thanks to my good work. We're just there saying, hey, we're open for business. Let's get you involved and have you voting.
Or Tom Harris and Bill Wills, I'm going to ask you both the same question. Tom, you first. I smell the stink of racism too often in American politics today. I think there's a narrative that people talk around, they de-emphasize, but when I ride through, and I covered the South Carolina primary in 2016, for instance, and there was David Duke, my old nemesis from the KKK, and he was running for office in Louisiana, and someone asked candidate Trump, I hear you've just been endorsed by David Duke. And candidate Trump said, never heard of him. And, he certainly watches me on TV. I covered him burning crosses over the years. Do you think that there is a subtle but real play to race in national politics and in state politics?
Well, the president, again, says and does some things that we've discussed before that certainly could be interpreted in that light. I mean, dismissive of African countries as whole countries. I wonder, we haven't discussed this, we've talked most of the issues. I wonder how much is the personality, the character, the temperament, the behavior of the president going to influence people's votes. Okay, yes, arguably more people are working, and the economy is in a pretty good place at the moment, although some of the prognosticators say, recession coming in 2020, which would obviously take a lot of the air out of the president's balloon. But I wonder how many people are so troubled by, the president's consistent behavior, spending disproportionate amount of time in Twitter fights with celebrities and, Rob, you have kids. What enumerate for me, what characteristics of the president would you point to and say, tell your children, I want you to be just like that.
He wins. He wins. But I don't know that any of us should choose celebrities as our role models. We have to live that out ourselves. Donald Trump does
So
and says things.
the president shouldn't be an example. The president shouldn't be a role model.
Did Bill Clinton prove that for us?
I'm not defending Bill Clinton, but I'm saying we're here, we're now.
We were saying we shouldn't be like Bill Clinton, but no one wanted to hear that, and they wanted to reelect him. So now we're saying, hey, I guess all bets are off.
Two bads make a good.
All right,
No,
but before you guys
president.
get going,
Okay.
what about race? What about race, Bill Wills?
I think race is to someone's heart, and I can't judge someone's heart. I think that's a tough question. I really do.
Of course, it's a tough question. We've been grappling with it since
Right.
1619.
And no doubt. And when it comes to President Trump, to your point earlier, I interviewed so many people, and they would talk about, he's tired of these politicians. We finally get a business person in there, run this country like it ought to be run, we'll be happy. Well, we got one. You may not like him. I worked for a guy who was very similar temperament. I mean, one day was this, and the next day was that, and, back and forth. He kind of runs the White House. There's more temporary standing in line posts being filled right now, acting this and that in Washington because you're not sure what he wants the next day.
I want to be his Twitter editor.
But you know what? With the president, though, he's got the media against him. And he's looking at a crowd larger than this. He's staying in the White House where 98% of the media is against him. And so he can go to Twitter and he can go directly to his people. As Reagan used the bully pulpit to talk directly, he's using Twitter to do it, just as technology has allowed him. One quick point on Biden. I think Joe Biden could do well in the union halls in Youngstown and Cleveland year after year. I mean, he had the message, he had him going. Trump came in with the same kind of power and message, and Biden can't get that back right now. And he just seems a bit tired. So
I'm going to let Chantal. Do you think that his time has passed, and do you fear that the others don't have the stature to take on the incumbent?
Well, I certainly feel like Trump has proven that his time is coming to an end. I mean, I think that when you have registered 12,000 lies since your tenure as president, when you, to Mr. Barris's point, identify African or black people, when you just diminish and dismiss it and call NFL players who are exercising their constitutional rights sons of bitches, that is not demonstrative of the characteristics that you would want to see in any leader. So it is frustrating, and I think those are personal things, those are personality things, but we should go back to the policies. When you talk about locking up children, when you're running up a double-digit trillion-dollar deficit, $26 trillion deficit, and those type of things, breaking promises, telling the people in Youngstown, don't sell your homes, we're bringing jobs back, and we see how that turned out. Those are the things that I think are causing Trump to lose part of his base that's whittling down. And he has also, to some point, been successful at making people distrustful of the media. And I think that's damaging just not only to our country, but the world.
Wait, why are you muttering? That he's distrustful of the media? You think he has good reason to be distrustful?
We're here.
Self-inflicted wound.
What is distrustful? All right. Grammaticus. Okay, I want to wrap this up by asking each of you to give your forecast, 2020 and Ohio's role, and I want to do it in reverse, beginning with you, Bill Wills.
Ohio's role in 2020. To Tom Barris's role, I don't know that we'll be the state that's hanging out late that night. I don't know the issues we're going to vote on yet, but I would have to mark up the state to Trump right now as far as the map goes, because Ohio is center-right as the country is center-right, and I don't see a current Democrat. Kamala Harris is fascinating and very interesting, but I don't see a current Democrat that can win Ohio. So I would right now score Ohio for Trump.
Okay, Rob Frost, the Republican.
Not Cuyahoga County.
Not Cuyahoga County. For the Democrat, okay. By a lot or a little?
He won last time by what, 8?
No, I'm talking about Cuyahoga.
Oh, Cuyahoga? He'll lose Cuyahoga by 20 points.
Oh, okay.
He'll win Ohio by 6.
Ohio by 6. Okay, Rob Frost, you'll take 6.
We'll take 6. I'd take that right now and take
6,
it going
you take
away.
1.
And if we win by 6 or more in Ohio, which I think is fair, I'd aim to take the over on that bill, and that we deliver Ohio. But if we do, by 6, 7, 8 points again, it's again going to be that linchpin in the Midwest that's going to help deliver Michigan, going to help deliver Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. That former Rust Belt that's now working again, that's the key, not just Ohio. But Ohio's the key of it. You know, the Democrats aren't going to win the White House unless they win Ohio. The Republicans can't reelect Donald Trump unless we carry Ohio. So I'll predict that, and the Browns minus 2.5 on Monday.
That might be more accurate. That's a tough one. Tom Harris, give me your overall. But before you do, did the Democrats in 2016 kill themselves with overconfidence?
You're speaking just in Ohio.
No, I'm looking nationally, but Ohio's too.
Well, yeah, I think media being an accomplice in all that. Media, we were all busy talking to each other instead of going out and doing our job and doing a better job of talking out to people where we'd have to drive away from downtown and the TV stations to get out into the suburbs and beyond in the rural communities to find out what they were thinking. So, yeah, I think we all got snookered a little bit by the polls, and the Democrats bought into it, and I think, you know, I just still remember the remarkable sensation, you know, watching the results come in and said,
stunning.
Okay, oh
Stunning.
my God, you know, the polls were all not worth the paper that they were printed on. So yeah, I think there was overconfidence, and I think there was presumption on the part of the media. So that's why you never want to say never about anything anymore. So I think I made an argument about how all the cards were stacked in favor of Trump here, but there's a whole another 14 months to go, and who knows what else is going to unfold. So I'll argue with myself and say I think question mark Democrat will win Ohio by 1.5%.
Really? I Democrat win Ohio by 1.5%.
I love it.
Be part of if the Democrats win.
If they win Ohio by 1.5%, then we're going to have a new president. Okay, Chantel Brown, you wrap it up for us. Give us your take on, do you stand, going to Tom's point, do you fear that looking at the polls with Trump at 38% approval and so forth, and every story you read in the Plain Dealer or the New York Times is negative Trump, do you fear that the overconfidence will seep back in the Democrats, even though you're not in office, and that you'll, you won't get that enormous turnout that you need so desperately in states like this one? That do you fear that people are just dismissive of this president and underestimate him?
You can't underestimate him. That's the one thing we have to take away from 2016. So it's going to take a lot of work, and I'm up for the challenge. I think that's one of the things that has afforded me to be in the position that I'm in. So I'm not afraid to work hard and work beyond the Cuyahoga County borders to ensure that we see a greater turnout and much higher voter turnout than we did in 2016.
I forgot to ask, and but just off the top of my head here, I forgot to ask about the Supreme Court and the issue of choice, and Mike DeWine's passage in the state of the fetal heartbeat bill. How do you play that? That's a wrong verb. How do you present that issue to the people without alienating those who believe in the sanctity of life?
Well, I think that is a decision that should be held between the woman and her doctor. So.
Good enough, but unlimited?
That is a decision that should be decided between the woman and her doctor. I mean, there are health reasons that could.
Don't you see how that leads the Republicans to suggest that you're for partial birth abortion, and that
I didn't say that.
But if it's only between the woman and the doctor, what about the woman who says, I'm due next week, but I don't want this baby?
I would not make such a decision.
I know you would. What about the Supreme Court of the United States? Wasn't that what the protest the day after inauguration was?
I thought Roe versus Wade was already settled.
Well, we'll see if Ruth Bader Ginsburg is replaced with Robert Bork. We'll see how long that lasts. Tom?
One thing I think we forgot to mention here is we don't know what other ballot issues are going to be on the ballot in 2020. And a lot of times those issues tend to bring out lots more voters on one, the other, or both sides. There's a good chance, or a possible chance right now, that there could be some sort of a measure dealing with mandatory background checks across the board at the legislature.
For guns.
For guns. There's a chance that this whole issue that we're seeing, this preposterous commercial about the Chinese running Chinese run a stranglehold on Ohio's power, that could be on the ballot.
We busted their chops last week.
And would bring out a certain kind of voters. I mean, that's another X factor that we can't put in the equation right now and see what it's going to mean.
I've never in my life seen a campaign. You've seen that ad about the Chinese taking over your jobs, and I said, what the hell is that about? Now, so we call. I asked Vic Gideon. I asked Bill Wills. What are and finally we found out it was some beef they have about subsidizing some nuclear power plants downstate. But that is, the media is so pervasive that it's very difficult to get out of the way of it. Okay, I've given everyone their chance to summarize, but let me bring in. Where's my colleague Vic Gideon? I want to bring Vic back in.
Yeah, first of all, hey, a big round of applause to Bill, to Rob, to Tom, and to Chantel, and Geraldo. Great job. That was an excellent, insightful, and meaningful. And now it's your turn. I have Rob Rizicki, who works with Geraldo in the morning.
Hello.
He's got this side of the room. So we're going to turn it over to you guys. Anybody have a question for either Geraldo or any of the panelists? Of course, it's got to be through the tables over there. All right. Hang on just a
Make your way to
moment.
the microphone.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I know. What's your name? Where are you from?
I'm Al Boda from Brecksville, Ohio.
Excellent.
And my question is for Chantal, but anyone can answer it. I've been watching the debates, and it seems that in the past, candidates were running to get the votes of citizens of the country. And it seems that the candidates for the Democratic nomination are more focused on illegal fugitive trespassers, taking away private insurance of citizens and giving it away, giving health care to those who have broken into this country. How do you see that as a winning formula?
Thank you for the question. As far as the winning formula, as it relates to some of the questions you're seeing on the Democratic national stage, I think that Ohio and Cuyahoga County is a little bit different, and as it relates to some of those issues that you discussed. Immigration is important, and we do want to maintain the health and safety of anyone that could potentially be harmful to our communities. Do I necessarily believe that we should be giving away health care and not allowing people to choose their own doctors? That's not where I stand. So I think as we progress and as we go and as we narrow the field down, the message will tighten, and again, we'll focus on doing the things that are getting back to working people and making sure that we're doing the things that are important to working people. That will be the message that I push and hopefully that the National Democratic Party will latch on to as well, because that's where we win. That's how we win.
Do you think on that immigration issue that there should be a decriminalization of the undocumented crossing into the United States, Chantel?
Decriminalization of the illegal.
In other words, make it not a crime. It's a crime now to cross into the states, into the United States without documentation, illegally. Do you think it should stay illegal? Do you think it should be a crime, or should it be decriminalized?
Are you asking me, do I want open borders? No. Okay.
But do you fear that the Democrats carry that burden, that the voters, as Tom Barris suggested, are much more centrist?
I think as voters, we all are much more centrist. I think, again, it's just the narrative that's being pushed is not necessarily reflective of the party as a whole. I think that there are a few loud voices that get a lot of attention, but it's not the true temperature of the majority of the Democratic
Who's
Party.
going to be your nominee?
That's the next meeting.
Try to sneak it in.
Snuck it in, that's it.
Rob over there, I think, has somebody.
Rob Rizicki, you have a question?
Yes, we do. What's your name, sir?
My name's Tom. I'm from Parma. I identify myself, not gender-wise, but as a Kennedy Democrat, which basically means nationally I vote Republican. If I could make a quick observation about Donald Trump and the fair criticism of his style, I think that's a fair criticism. The University of Indiana basketball didn't like the style of their basketball coach, a man by the name of Bobby Knight. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here.
He was a good friend of Trump. I don't know if they still are.
I was not aware of that. Bobby Knight was not politically correct. He was not softly spoken. What's happened to their basketball program since he left? He was a very good leader, and that's what Trump is. For Chantel, I have a question. Thank you. He's also been compared to the salty sea captain in the middle of a storm, too. He might not be all that nice, but he's the guy you want in charge. Chantel, you were talking about the subject of woman's choice. Why is man's choice left out of that choice?
That's a good question.
I have a big-time problem with that.
But I
it
guess
doesn't happen unless the man's brought into the equation.
I guess it's because the child is in the woman's womb for about 9-10 months, so that's probably why it goes back to the woman more often than the man.
But it doesn't get there without the man.
Listen, no one's arguing biology. I think that's a good that's a fact. When we're talking facts, men are definitely a part of the equation. But since women have the duty, the burden, and responsibility of carrying a child, I think that's probably why more people generally lean to the decision coming down to the woman.
I believe that's a conversation that should be had because the men do have a financial responsibility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a question right over here, Geraldo.
Okay, Vic.
And I'll get you next. What's your name and where you're from?
Ken Pitlack, Valley View. Questions for Geraldo. There's a lot of concern throughout the country, and you brought it up a couple times today, is the president a racist? Simple question to you. You've stated that you've known the president for over 40 years. You consider yourself a friend. Simple yes or no. Is Donald Trump a racist?
No, he is not a racist.
Thank you.
But yes, he has difficulty sometimes restraining some of his more flamboyant rhetoric, which can fairly viewed be seen as racialist, if not racist. I want him to make everyone feel comfortable, but I think that it's very difficult when the press is so ganged up against you. Why do you think people were worried about the Deborah Messing and what's his name, Eric McCormick's campaign to out people in Hollywood who were supportive of Donald Trump? The reason that people were embarrassed to be publicly identified with Donald Trump, I submit, is because of this this cloud of racism and the charge of racism. And who the hell wants that? Who wants to be picketed or boycotted the way Stephen Ross was, the guy who owns Soul Cycle? He had the fundraiser for Donald Trump in the Hamptons, and then he got boycotted. It's because the reason that it's not the boycott, it's nobody wants to have that label thrown at them. It's a charge that is very easily made and very difficult to rebut. What do you say when you're accused of being a racist? Oh, I have lots of black friends. Come on, that's so 1950s. I mean, everybody's got all kinds of friends. It doesn't show you one thing or the other thing. It's a very troubling allegation, easily made, difficult to rebut, and I condemn this. So when you see Baltimore, for example, and you look at 17,000 wrecked buildings, you just say, hey, these are African American people. These are American citizens. These are our neighbors, brothers and sisters, and now they live in this awful. How is this allowed to exist for so long? This is a terrible. We as a country have lots of history to live down. I like Trump's positive, futuristic vision for the country. He wants everybody to make money. I like that. That's why I'm a Republican. I want everybody to make money. I want everybody to live anywhere they want to live. Go to any school they want to go to. Shaker Heights. Let's take Shaker Heights. Anybody can live in Shaker Heights as long as you have the money. There's no race. Shaker Heights used to exclude Jews and everybody. Now anybody can live anywhere they want to, but I think that this onus on the Republican Party is unfortunate. The Democrats know it, and they exploit it, and I don't like it. You know, you make that charge, man, oh man, you better have evidence, because that's like accusing someone of cheating on his wife, or, you know, it's very, very unfair. I don't like that Trump is labeled, but I also don't like his imprecise language.
I think Rob's got somebody over there.
Yes, we do, right down here. What's your name, sir? Doug from Middlefield. And, okay, I just want to make a comment. Does anybody here want $5 gasoline? Does anybody here want $5 gasoline?
Oh, yeah, one guy.
Okay, okay. Well, I just want to make a point. I'm a chemical engineer, and I understand some of this stuff. Fracking, the miracle of fracking, has brought the United States to leadership in energy production.
And earthquakes.
And we have also, that's BS. Also, we have a situation where we have dialed back our carbon footprint to 1985 because we're using natural gas efficiently to produce power and a lot of other things. So here we are. Every candidate on the Democratic side has said they want to ban fracking in this country. We have unique geologic structures in the United States, one of the few countries that can actually even do this. And so why would we cut our necks off in terms of energy production just because of some political expedience?
Well, let me ask you, what's wrong with solar power? Or, you know, I like when I drive around Cleveland, you go to, you know, the Brown Stadium there, and there's got that big windmill running.
Well, it's cost prohibitive. You cannot compete in a kilowatts per acre. It takes a lot of acreage for solar to work. And also, the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, and it's expensive to store electricity. It's in real time. And if you start shutting down power plants for something that is only available for so many hours a day, it's going to cause a problem to the grid.
Rob Frost, why are Trump's approval ratings so low?
Oh, you totally took a turn on me there. I was going to get more to the Listen, I agree with the questioner there. So let me start with that. I'm the former chair of the Ohio Oil and Gas Commission. We need to utilize the resources that we have here right in the United States and take advantage of the energy independence that we can be in charge of. Now, why are President Trump's approval ratings so low? It is the constant battle of the media, not everyone in the media, thank you, Geraldo, we welcome you. That constant
I'll be on Hannity tonight.
That he's facing each day, and look, he's willing to take it on, though. He's going right to people. It was asked of me before, you know, would you say things this way, or Geraldo, you say, well, I like some of the policies and the effect, but I wish he'd tone it down a little bit. Well, President Trump says things differently than I might say them, but he would say, well, that's why he's president and I'm not. So you can't take one half of Donald Trump. You got to take the whole package. And what he's doing is winning and leading and moving this country forward. And I like the whole package of it. Even if on a given day I go, wow, you know, I might have phrased that differently. Let's move forward with this president. But he's battling that. And I love what Bill Willis said before. He's facing this whole crowd of people like are here today, but they're the press corps. And they're waving their microphones at him, and they're challenging him on, you know, isn't this a lie, and how could you have said that? And he just goes over to Twitter and tells people what he's really thinking. And for the next news cycle, all they can talk about is a Sharpie marker.
Did you see the great story of the day? Hold on just a second. Great story of the day. Great story of the day. Enterprising business person. His campaign, as of today, is now selling full autograph Sharpie markers.
Yes. So set the record straight, yeah. I apologize, you know, we have time for one more question, and I got her a line first, so if you could tell me your name and where you're from.
Tracy Delmonico from Oberlin, and I just have a question for everyone. I would call myself a nationalist, and in the words of Yoram Harozny, a nationalist is someone who is for every country being able to be an individual, sovereign nation with their own agenda, putting themselves first. Which is what Donald Trump, regardless if you're liberal or Republican, whatever you are, everyone in this country, in every country, should be a nationalist. So my question for the panel is, why has being a nationalist become a bigoted, xenophobic term instead of a unifying umbrella?
I think it's a great question, but this is exactly what I mean when I say the president's rhetoric is sloppy. Because the word has become so loaded, it's become so fraught with its identity with white nationalism that it makes people uncomfortable. So
I could say anything as white nationalism.
but yes, but why not use a different word? Why not say you're patriotic, for instance? Doesn't that work too?
Yeah, because nationalism is an accepted term since the
Give her the
beginning.
mic, Vic.
Nationalism is an accepted term versus imperialism, which is what Hitler was, which is what the Romans were, which is what the Greeks were, which was like, hey, let's take our views and impose it on the four corners of the globe.
I get your argument. It's very intellectual.
I mean,
and
I'm
very
white-heeled
sound.
right now, but does that mean all heels are like white power? I don't think so.
But if it makes people uncomfortable, why not just use a different word?
I was a former teacher, and everything makes everybody uncomfortable. When does it stop? The oversensitivity, when everything is offensive.
Let me take a stab at answering. Address it to the panel. I'm willing to go first. And part of it
I'm going to let Bill Wills. We haven't heard from Bill in a while.
what I
No, I'm fine. You're good. I got to get up at 2:30.
I'll keep it brief. The PC police took certain words away from us. They said we couldn't use them anymore. And what Donald Trump is doing is taking those words back.
I say, why bother if it bothers people? Just use a different word. But that's I call myself roadkill. Why? Because I'm in the middle of the road. And my old boss said the only thing in the middle of the road is roadkill. So that's me.
I might be the same way. I might be more worried about offending people, trying to be diplomatic. I'm glad we've got a president who isn't worried about all that time and is just doing what needs to get done in this country.
Okay. All right. Now we've had all the questions, Vic. Let me have your summary, and we'll get Will's, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, first of all, very insightful, and I'd like to thank everybody on the panel, certainly. I think Chantal was on the hot seat more than almost anybody, and then second, yeah, I know. You had some tough questions. I think Rob had some tough questions as well. But again, I think at the end of the day, it was civil. I thought we had, there was a lot of information that was out. We had both sides presented, I thought, fairly accurately and also fairly eloquently. And, again, I think people had their opinions. But yet everybody, I think, let everybody else talk, and certainly didn't degenerate into anything that was anything other than a civil discourse, which I think is what we set out to do today. So, yes. Thank you all. So great job, everybody.
Bill? Yes, Geraldo.
Just say goodbye.
Goodbye. See you in the morning at 5. Traffic and weather on the 10s. Go Browns.
I'll be right after him, 9 to 10 o'clock, with my pal and colleague Vic Gideon and Rob Rizicki, our producer. Go Browns. Good. Thank you for listening.